The White House foreshadowed that they would be taking a more assertive, a more aggressive approach to this impeachment just because, they sort of say that it's baseless, there's no evidence and things like that. What I found really interesting is their messaging about it, because they were right. They were very reactive, particularly the morning of when there was reporting that, the speaker would say that it's the next logical step. But then we saw in the press briefing room that Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre sort of stood back and then again sort of delegated questions to the counsel's office. I don't know how sustainable that is going to be, because I think eventually when push comes to shove and we're seeing more hearings and more investigations and things like that, TV outlets are going to want response on camera, and they can't just keep bringing out, written statements and things like that. So whether the counsel's office kind of becomes more involved, do gaggles, do more TV appearances, I think that they're going to have to be, sort of take a forward-leaning approach to it.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by White House reporter Naomi Lim. Naomi, it's impeachment time. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has announced that they're going to launch an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden's business dealings or not business dealings with his son Hunter, his level of involvement in that. Talk a little bit about how the White House has responded to this.
What's been really interesting is that we knew that this was coming for a little while, or at least the threat of it was hanging over the White House for a while. And, the speaker finally hit go. And what's been really interesting is that the White House foreshadowed that they would be taking a more assertive, a more aggressive approach to this impeachment just because, they sort of say that it's baseless, there's no evidence and things like that. What I found really interesting is their messaging about it, because they were right. They were very reactive, particularly the morning of when there was reporting that, the speaker would say that it's the next logical step. But then we saw in the press briefing room that Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre sort of stood back and then again sort of delegated questions to the counsel's office. I don't know how sustainable that is going to be, because I think eventually when push comes to shove and we're seeing more hearings and more investigations and things like that, TV outlets are going to want response on camera, and they can't just keep bringing out, written statements and things like that. So whether the counsel's office kind of becomes more involved, do gaggles, do more TV appearances, I think that they're going to have to be, sort of take a forward-leaning approach to it. I guess their flip side is that they're also worried about elevating some of the claims, and I think that's a competing priority that they're going to have to grapple with as more things come to light as the inquiry unfolds.
I mean, a big thing that they've tried to do is have all these memos where they're talking about Republican skeptics of whether they have enough evidence for impeachment, and they're constantly reworking the idea that there's no evidence of the central allegations, that it's baseless, sort of their variant, I guess, of no collusion, right? So, they think that they can sort of, thread the needle between not elevating this, but also shutting it down.
And when you're talking about the memos, what I thought was really interesting this recently was that they wrote sort of a memo telling the media that they should be skeptical about these the inquiry. And I think it's kind of interesting that they tried to school the media on how to do their job, whether that is something that will work for them in the long run in terms of sort of that, really paternalistic approach. I don't know whether that is sort of brings people onto their case, but you're right that they're sort of saying, baseless, no evidence, no collusion is like sort of their tagline. But eventually I think they're going to have to say something more than just no evidence. I think they're going to have to maybe address it a little bit more fully.
There is the question, though, of does this really even have enough Republican support to go forward? Originally, Kevin McCarthy was going to have a vote before he talked about launching the inquiry. Now he's sort of preemptively announced it, sort of Nancy Pelosi style. Is that a thing where maybe this just doesn't come together?
Well, that's something that the White House has really seized on. They sort of said, well, if the speaker doesn't even have the votes to start the inquiry, why is he doing this at all? Obviously, the speaker is coming under pressure from his right flank, particularly when we're facing a government shutdown. And we're sort of seeing, and so the White House is picking up on that. What I thought was also really interesting is that the president spoke at a fundraiser recently, which, as we know, is like when he is more open
That's
about his
Biden
thoughts.
Unplugged,
exactly,
sort of, yeah.
Which I find so weird because he knows reporters are in the room, but because there are no cameras, maybe he feels like a little bit more at ease. And he kind of linked this impeachment very directly to the shutdown. And so I think that's something, as we sort of, as he sort of makes the case that Republicans are being extreme in the way that their approach to him, I think that's something that we'll see more of too.
It's like the 90s all over again. Maybe the Dave Matthews Band will be at the next fundraiser.
Maybe, we'll see.
So something Biden likes to talk about a little bit more, though, than impeachment is Bidenomics versus Magnomics?
Magnomics? I know.
Magnomics.
It's coming back. I was like looking through my emails, and actually the Trump campaign used the term Magnomics back in 2020. So we're sort of seeing, again, the White House reclaiming old phrases like Bidenomics was sort of a reclamation of what the Wall Street Journal wrote in an opinion piece, sort of criticizing the state of the economy.
Yeah.
And so what we're sort of seeing is this push from the White House to really make a contrast between, Biden's economic policies and those of what the more right of the party, or the more populist side of the Republican Party is pushing, particularly again with the shutdown. Looking through how they're defining it, it's been quite interesting. So the White House has started defining Magnomics as sort of being, a tax on social welfare programs like Social Security, Medicare, etc., as well as sort of supporting tax cuts for corporations at the expense of working class people. So it's interesting to see that side of it. The Trump campaign, even the Republican National Committee are sort of really welcoming this contrast, because in their minds, the economy was quite strong under Trump, not including the pandemic, which was sort of an aberration, but comparing price increases where we're seeing inflation sort of tick up over these past 2 months. And so I think that, again, when Biden brought out this idea of Bidenomics, people were sort of skeptical whether it was a smart approach, because if you sort of promote it, if you live by it, you also can die by it.
Sure.
And so we're seeing now Republicans saying, okay, bring on these comparisons. We're looking forward to it.
Ultra Magnomics or Mega Magnomics?
Oh, we'll find out.
Thank you, Naomi. You can read Naomi and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.